Hello folks, today I want to bring you something that might be a little bit controversial, and I don't really understand why. I think it's needless controversy. A few years ago, a brand erupted onto the market, claiming to be disrupting the watch market and bringing us watches in a new way that brought us reasonably priced watches at a much lower price point than we were normally going to expect by cutting out the middlemen and phrases like that. Now, I haven't told you the brand yet because there's been a number of brands that have erupted and marketed, mainly on social media, that have claimed the same thing. I would suggest Filippo Loretti. I would suggest Daniel Wellington. But this one I'm going to talk about today is MVMT. And this is my MVMT watch I'm going to show you now. Now, MVMT claiming to be selling as a higher quality product at a lower price than anybody else can imagine, started off as an internet only brand. But I bought this watch from a shop, and when I bought the watch from the shop, it appears to me that it's just like any other brand in the store. There's a lot of hate on the internet claiming that the products are substandard and that you're paying more than you should do for them. And certainly the business model's not original at all. I mean, most of the watches that you see on Wish and AliExpress have a similar idea. They're really only sold through the internet. They aren't available in stores, at least here in the UK and possibly the States or the rest of Europe. I don't know. Anyway, here we go. I'm going to show you this watch. We'll flip the camera around and have a wee look, and I'll tell you what I think about it. And spoiler alert, I actually think it's pretty good. Now, I don't think it's anything special. I think it's just like any other watches that you buy at that price point from a retail jeweller's store in the United Kingdom. I don't think it's particularly good. I don't think it's particularly good value. But at the same time, there isn't anything wrong with it either. It's not a case that this watch should be being sold at a much lower price point, and I'm pretty sure they're made in Chinese factories, but I don't know that. The manufacturer, MVMT, don't really say where the watches are manufactured. They just say that they're designed in Los Angeles in-house. What I will say about this watch though, this watch here, is that this watch I think has a cracking design, and I think it's made of fairly good quality materials. Because of that, I wouldn't hesitate to recommend one of these if you wanted to buy a Christmas present or something like that. But let's flip the camera around and have a look at it. I'll show you the watch indoors and I'll show you outside and I'll twirl it around. There isn't that much to show you here because it's a very simplistic design. There's no complications to display and there isn't an awful lot to talk about. Essentially, this watch is, well, it's a fashion watch, I suppose, but it's not from a fashion brand, it's from a watch brand. Although, to be honest, I've heard that they've recently branched out into selling sunglasses and other things like that, so maybe they've lost a little bit of kudos there. Anyway, let's flip the camera and have a look. Here's a view from above showing what they describe as a vintage inspired case in gunmetal grey. It's supposed to be 50s inspired, but those lugs look very reminiscent of the wire lugs that used to be welded onto converted pocket watches way back in the First World War. So I think the inspiration actually comes a bit earlier than the 1950s. And that onion winder with its really deep knurling on it certainly is also reminiscent of a pocket watch. It's a 41mm case. The plain white face and the small seconds hand. I'm a sucker for a small seconds hand, I really like it. There's no printing anywhere on the dial, but the dial's on 2 levels and it's a cutout which makes the movement logo, the MVMT, so I keep thinking of it as movement, I think you're supposed to think that. The chapter ring has hour markers only, there's no minutes shown. Here's a wee view of the watch sort of moving around a little bit, maybe the reflections a bit different. You can see that gunmetal case and it's a different tone of gunmetal, sort of steel grey for the back of the watch, which it claims a Japanese movement and 50 metres of water resistant, and that's the model number there on it. All stainless steel. Now it's PVD coated. In the past they used to electroplate watches and that would leave a thicker coating but would be liable to come off quite easily. Whereas ion plating, or PVD as it's sometimes also called, actually deposits the metal onto the steel at a molecular level, which makes it an awful lot more robust. It's, if you like, it's stuck onto the steel a lot better than electroplating is, and therefore is it claimed to be more durable, although the plating itself can be thinner. Anyway, as you can see here, the lugs aren't wired and they've got quick release spring bars on the leather strap, which is a welcome addition to any watch. I think it's a brilliant idea. Looking a bit closer at the back of the watch here, you can see that the engraving is actually really quite a good standard. It's nicely etched on the back there. And there's the front of the watch again, showing that quite nice face, but very minimal. With hollowed out hands, they're not loomed. Looking at the watch side on, we can see that unlike an awful lot of watches at this price point, they haven't went for a flat crystal. Now, I don't imagine that the crystal on this watch is sapphire, because they don't claim it to be sapphire, and I'm sure they would, but you see there's a nice dome on it. Doming the crystal goes very well with the retro inspiration of the watch, and I think it just looks really nice. Bringing the watch outside, we'll give it a wiggle around in the very revealing sunshine. See MVMT engraved there on the clasp, and that the crystal doesn't have any anti-reflective coating or not. It's quite reflective. You can see the dome on it there again. There isn't a sharp edge anywhere on this watch. The watch is smooth, the case back is nicely curved and meets the curve of the upper case. The lugs are all rounded and nicely curved. It's a very comfortable watch to wear, and that leather strap, genuine leather, and that can mean, well, it can mean things that you don't think it means, but it's a nice, soft, supple strap. The watch is a very, very high comfort level on the wrist, but it's not all good news here, and I'm going to come to that in a minute. If any of you have watched my videos before, you'll know about my metronome test that I apply to quartz watches. This is where you find out if the movement's all nice and tight, or if there's free play in the gear train. Anyway, with this watch, it unfortunately does fail the gear train backlash test. If you have a look here at my metronome test, you can quite clearly see that the minute hand is moving a little bit as I tilt the watch. Now, it's not a deal breaker because it's only a little bit. It's about as much as I would tolerate. I was wondering if it's a genuine nice movement inside the watch, so I popped it open, and yes, just as they claim, it's a Japanese myota movement. Now, I'm not saying all the watches suffer from this problem, but it's something to look out for if you get a chance to test it in a shop before you buy. Well folks, what did you think of that? Here's the watch again, one last little look. It's the 1st of December today, and some of you may have already done your Christmas shopping, but if you haven't, this is something I think would be a reasonable consideration for a Christmas present for someone. It's a nice watch, well made. Nobody would object to receiving this in their stocking unless they're an out-and-out watch snob. Yes, you can get better for the money, but you can have the reassurance of purchasing this from a major British retailer and other places, I'm sure, in the States and Europe as well. And so you'll have maybe a little bit more reassurance warranty-wise and things like that. Anyway, I'm going to leave you now because it's the 1st of December, and I'm going to let Santa have the last word. Here he is. Santa, take it away.